Just say it.
We are live. This is Steve Hargadon, and I'm with John and Finn Kernohan. And they've been living in their 300 square foot tiny home for 3 years now. They're the organizers of the Tiny House Festivals of the United Tiny House Association. And they're going to talk to us in this special presentation for the Tiny House Summit on bringing tiny houses together. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you. Just to clarify and to brag a little, we've been living in our tiny house for 5 years. We're here on our homestead in Georgia Woods. We live off grid, and we own our own property here. That's how we're able to live tiny here on our homestead. And we live in our 304 square foot. That 4 extra square feet is my man cave. I get to hang my caps on the wall. And we just started our second build, our 125 square foot tiny house on wheels.
Maybe we should mention first that our house that we currently live in right now is on skid. It's
Yes.
not on wheels.
Yes, the house that we've been living in, our tiny house that we've been living in for the past 5 years, is built. It's not portable. It's built on skids, raised on blocks, and it's we call it our beloved cabin. And my cat just pulled down the curtain behind us. That's why everything got bright all of a sudden.
So we should also mention we got 6 cats and a dog. So, living tiny with all these animals together with us. So it's sometimes can be chaotic, but that most of the time was good. And
and our chickens.
Sorry, I forgot. We got 5 chickens.
So, but we want to thank you, Steve, for inviting us to be part of the Tiny House Summit. We're real excited here. And today we just wanted to share about our vision, if you will, on what we call bringing tiny houses together. Our organization, the United Tiny House Association, we organize the Tiny House Festivals of the United Tiny House Association. And one thing that we started when we first started our Tiny House Festivals was embracing all modalities of the tiny house community, whether it's brand new builder models, DIY models, converted school buses, private owners, just vintage campers, whether mobile tiny houses,
Wheels, on wheels,
tiny houses on foundations. We even have the philosophy of, a lot of your hardcore purist tiny housers, it's 500 square feet or less. I'm not about to turn to somebody who's downsizing from 3,000 square feet to 800 square feet and not tell them they're not living in a tiny house. To us, welcome aboard the tiny house movement. And what we've recognized in the process of our tiny houses festivals is there's a lot out there in regards to bringing the entire tiny house community together, not just bringing together just the tiny houses themselves of different types, but all the people. When we first started out, if we would have listened to the people, the experts who were giving us counsel, we wouldn't be where we're at today. I remember the very first time that I posted something on Facebook in a group, I shared that we were doing a portable building or shed conversion. I was blasted unmercifully. I mean, it was horrible. I was ripped from here till tomorrow about how horrible that is, how terrible it is, how dangerous it is. Black mold, black plague. I mean, just everything and its sister came down on me. And I became a wallflower for about a couple of months on the Facebook tiny house groups. I didn't say anything because, I mean, I was ganged up on. And it really taught me a lesson, because if I would have listened to all of this feedback, constructive criticism that we were getting, we wouldn't be where we're at today. We wouldn't be living over 5 years in our tiny house. We wouldn't be building our second tiny house right now. We wouldn't have our successful tiny house festivals, which, by the way, are charitable events where we donate the proceeds to charities. So we wouldn't be helping so many people by the means of tiny houses. And over our years, we've witnessed how there's so much uniqueness, and there's so many people are driven so passionately with their beliefs in the tiny house community that a lot of times we as the tiny house community, we could be more embracing in how we share our opinions, especially with folks that are just getting started, or the people on the outside looking in, or those who are inquisitive. I always use the composting toilet conversations. We sat back on Facebook and listened to people talk about composting toilets, and it's just, don't buy this brand, it's so expensive. Buy this one. You're a fool if you get this. Don't do this. Do that. I mean, long threads of sometimes very harsh comments just about composting toilets, and super great advice, super great counsel, super great information, but sometimes being delivered in a way that is just so, I feel sorry for the person who asked the question, who said, I'm thinking about buying this toilet. And we see this time and time again, where there's these great opportunities for us as a tiny house community, for groups and leaders and organizations and events, for us all to work together for the common good of growing the tiny house movement. For there is no number one group, there is no number one builder, there is no number one modality of living tiny. There's all these great groups, there's all these great builders, there's all these great modalities within the tiny house movement. And fortunately for Finn and I, we get to sit and witness all these great opportunities and all these great people, and all these great groups through our organization and the places that we get invited to speak or go and see. And that's our cat's tail coming into the frame there.
CP.
That's CP. So that's the message that we like to share with people. Is it's not, reporters ask us sometimes, oh, well, young urbanites, they're the number one type of person in the tiny house movement, or it's retired people over the age of 50. No, there is no certain type, and all the different types can all support and encourage each other. I think my wife and I are a true example of the uniqueness and the way different folks within the tiny house community can bond with each other and support each other. Physically, we're very different. Finn's 4'9", a bodybuilder, a personal trainer. Ty, dark hair, dark skin, sweet.
Well, to a certain point.
To a certain point.
Not always sweet, yes.
I'm your typical Florida, Georgia redneck, lighter shade of beige. The only color I have on me is liver spots. My only activity other than working around the homestead here is lifting Diet Pepsis during the day. We're very different. I was completely against the whole.
I think we also differently, like mentality too.
Yeah. Like
attitudes and things.
Right. If I didn't have the open mind that I guess I had, I wouldn't be living tiny right now. I wouldn't be happy right now. I wouldn't be happy living a minimalist lifestyle, living off grid, having a composting toilet. These were all things that my wife had planted seeds and brought up and discussed that, and she presented them in a way where I was able to receive them and listen to them. And I think in the tiny house community, I think my wife's great. I know I'm bragging, but I think she's a great example of how you can take somebody like me, living in a 2,500 square foot Miami house with an 800 square foot apartment on the back, living by myself with cars and waste and, 2 identical rice makers in the kitchen and 20 sets of silverware and all the, just a room full of junk, and be able to get rid of all of that, simply because of her delivery mechanism, and how she shared. Um, I think there are so many people in the tiny house movement, we believe, that have such a wealth of information that could be received so well, if delivered in a way that would be with kindness and generosity and in a sharing, nurturing way. Because I think that there's so many people like myself in the beginning who can kind of take a step back because of how information is delivered. And unfortunately, as great as the internet is, as fantastic as Facebook is on getting so much information out there, it's also a means of information being shared in a very non-personal, non-friendly way. And I think that's one of the reasons why we try to not say anything negative online. So,
well, I mean, I don't know, you are an expert, when it's come to join the groups and be part of the groups and things like that. So you know more than I do, because me personally, I do not care what other people think. So I just, I know what I want. So I just go and do it. And yes, of course, all information is help, but, do not take all those things that are going to bring you down. You have to empower yourself. Look out there, look for information, and then gather all the information, and then you the only one going to decide what you want to do and make it happen. Basically.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
At our last tiny house festival down in Florida, we had 97 tiny structures, tiny houses, tiny structures. There were so many different types. There were so many different people. The uniqueness of the individuals in their houses, their mindsets, who they were. I make the joke, there was everything from the hemp sandal granola chewing folks to the New Balance 609 Budweiser folks like me to the Gucci folks. I mean, and all these folks came together, and they're able to share and sponge information from each other. And it was such a positive, and we see this at the tiny house festivals, not just ours, but like the Jamboree, Darren and Coles and Angela Alcorn, shout out to those great people. And the Jamboree out in Colorado, we had the blessing to be able to go out there and pick up trash for 2 days. It was great being volunteers out there, and to see how everybody was meshing and getting along and sharing, and it would just be so wonderful that it doesn't just take these great events for everybody to share and mesh and blend and to share the information, but to do that just in our daily lives, and whether it's on a Facebook page or whether it's running into somebody on the street or encountering somebody as you're towing your tiny house. And we had the opportunity for the first time to tow a tiny house for some friends and a builder also. And it was really funny. Every time we stopped, it became like an immediate tourist attraction, a gas station or a store or whatever, everybody coming up. And it was really cool to have that opportunity to share and to talk to folks. And everybody was so excited. Oh, there's a tiny house here. People beeping their horns as you're driving by and everything, kind of made it wish it was ours. And it's these brief encounters that we have with folks, and that we can make a lasting impression about what the tiny house community and the tiny house movement is really all about. Because it takes that one moment to come across or to share something negatively where that person could walk away thinking, tiny houses are, they're not right, or those people live in tiny houses, just because of that one encounter with that one person. I don't think everybody realizes that we're all ambassadors of the tiny house community. I'll give you an example. People have their opinions and how they share things. And they have like real positive opinion, or they have real strong opinions. and they have the opportunity to share it. We just announced about a month or two ago the new Tiny House Scholarship Fund. And this is an annual scholarship for graduating high school seniors that are college bound. And through our organization, we have $1,000 a year scholarship. And so we got inquiries from it. Some people would contact us and they would say, you know, $1,000, you know, that isn't how does that help a call? And, you know, how, you know, like a, you know, genuine question, and how, and, you know, we can explain it and share with it. And then you might get, then we would get an inquiry for somebody just like, oh, that's stupid. $1,000, that's nothing, you know. And so it's two of the same exact identical questions being delivered in two different delivery mechanisms, where one side of me receives it as, I want to take an hour to share with you, and then the other one, I'm just sort of like, oh man, that's really rough, and I'm receiving this really hard, and it's the same way on how we share our, you know, our information and opinions with folks.
I think what you try to say is, you know, just be kind to each other. Is that what you try to say?
Yeah, like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Yeah. Showing our age there for anybody. Just say FYI. So my wife is laughing because she doesn't get that one.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah. So, but it's there's so much great information out there. There's so many great people in the tiny. There's so many people who we don't even know about that have great information, and we encounter them. You know, they're not the people with a book. They're not the people with a website. They're not an organizer of the event. They don't even live in a tiny house. And we've encountered, I mean, but they are a wealth of information. And we've encountered these people, and we're like, I sit there as a doe-eyed student looking at the professor, like just mesmerized by the wealth of information that I'm thinking of one particular person right now. And he was just able to share so much information. And
Who is he?
I'm not going to plug him here live or anything. He might be embarrassed, but but to share that type of information and everything, and to hear it, he might not, you know, have the opportunity to share that if somebody was to look at him and say, I remember somebody saying to me once about another person, well, she doesn't live in a tiny house. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, and I kind of let that influence me. You know, we're going back 5 years ago. And I've learned since then, it doesn't matter, because I've taken an opportunity. I met this other person, and he doesn't live in a tiny house, but he's such a wealth of information. And so there's so many, again, it's another example of how, you know, it's how we see people, how we share the information, how we talk about other people. That's a big one too. You know, there's people walking around out there in the tiny house movement who are super awesome, incredible people. And then all it takes is for one person to share, oh, I talked to them about solar panels and they don't know what they're talking about, you know, and now all of a sudden that person is labeled in that other person's mind as he or she doesn't know anything about solar panels. No, it could be that, you know, we didn't see eye to eye about solar, and I'm using this as a made up example. I don't know this to be a real scenario, but we encounter these things where people will share with us about, you know, well, I talked to such and such and they don't know, you know, they're wrong about this. Well, maybe at that moment you two didn't sync up on what you were talking about on that subject, but that person could have just a whole ton of information that is beneficial to somebody else. So again, we just really feel that within the tiny house community, that it's everybody in the tiny house community, not just the book people, the website people, the builders, but even the people that are up and coming, just investigating it. We all have something to share and to teach with each other, and how we present that information, and how we talk about each other, and how we talk about what people know, or how we interpret what they present to us as what they know. It's how the world looks at us from as a community. And that's the thing. We are a community, whether we're on the West Coast, East Coast, you know, whether we're doing it on wheels, on foundations, yurts. I didn't even know what a yurt was when we first started off. That's how newbie we were when we first started off. Somebody contacted us about their yurt, and I'm like, they make yogurt? I mean, I was like, I had no idea what a yurt was. So, and I had, I learned a lot just because, and this person knew so much about yurts and everything, and they don't live in a yurt. They just started sharing all about yurts to me and everything. And I learned so much from this person about, who I'm referring to, and Carrie.
Oh,
so,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And a rocket scientist about yurts. And I learned so much from this person. And again, this is somebody who just knows all about it, and somebody else who might live in a yurt may possibly discount that person because they don't live in one, but the person's a rocket scientist about it, Yeah.
John?
Yep.
So I want to see if I can make a connection and tell me if you think I'm right. So I really have loved what you said in the whole concept of kindness and generosity, Finn, and this sense of community. Is that because, do you think, in large part, this is not actually about wood and framing and building houses often as much as it is about rethinking lifestyle and life choices? And so without kindness and generosity, it's just technical, whereas a lot of people are actually coming at this to try and figure out how to change their lives?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And the technical part aspects of it, and the building and the wooden stick and brick and mortar and the axles, that's just something that comes along with it. And in some cases, it's not even part of it. Felice Cohen, she's an author out of New York. Felice, I had the luxury of being able to get to know Felice last year. And I say a luxury. Felice lives in New York. She lives in an apartment. I mean, she's in the big city. When I think of tiny houses up to that point, I did not think of New York. Believe me, I did not. Even though my wife comes from Thailand, Bangkok, small houses, small apartment, small living.
Actually, no. That's London.
Oh, London.
Everything is so tiny.
Yeah, that's true too. When I met my wife, she was living in London, and I actually had to hunch over to go into her loft apartment because it was the top of a one of those brickstones in the attic, and there was only one place in the her apartment where I could actually stand, and it was where the skylight was, and if we opened the skylight, I could actually stand in it. So yeah. But
yes, I think it's about mentality that people want to change that lifestyle.
Right.
You have to willing to change first, and then other things will just follow.
Right, exactly. And getting back to Felice, she's a prime example of that. 90 square foot apartment in New York, 90 square feet. 90 square feet. That is
tiny.
We live in 300 square feet plus 2 lots. Our new build right now is 125 square feet, including that includes though the 1 lot. 90 square feet, Felice, in her book, what I learned living in 90 square feet. I think that's the title. And here's a lady in a city, the epitome of what most people don't think what tiny housing is all about. And we've learned so much from her, just the little tidbits and from her posts and things of that nature.
So there's always that
Go ahead. Son.
I wanted to springboard from that because our audience is going to get to hear from Felice. She's one of our featured speakers.
Yeah.
And Felice is, so part of the interesting side of Felice's story is that she did that as a means of being able to focus on writing, and that it gave her some freedom, right? Freedom from having to accomplish other things, but be able to really focus on the writing. So if we sort of look at lifestyle changes and we look at freedom and happiness was mentioned, What are really, to both of you, what are the core drivers of this movement that you really care about?
For us personally, for us as a couple, it's the love and happiness as a couple and as a family. Um, we were once asked why we like being in a tiny house where we see each other all the time.
That because we like to see each other.
We like being around each other.
Yeah. So
we,
otherwise it wouldn't work. Otherwise you might want to kill your partner before the day ends if you're not enjoying, being with your partner. Which is we actually ran into that at one point.
Yeah.
Right.
When we our first
when we
year
first started.
Our first year living tiny, we were about 8 months into it, 6 months into it.
I'm not sure, but you actually the one
Yeah.
who got the problem.
Yeah. I was kind of I was kind of like, I need my man cave. I need my man cave. I'm gonna go sit in a tree. I'm gonna go dig a hole and put a chair in it and sit out in the woods. I'm gonna do something. And but once we talked about it, that was kind of like the beginning and end of it.
I think it's bring us closer. Being in a tiny space, you kind of like have to get along, and it's nowhere for you to go. Of course, you can go outside, but how long can you be outside? You got to come inside at one point. You have to face the problem.
Yep.
So I think that in a way challenging, but also rewarding.
And just other things with, and we were Finn just actually the other day, she's made a comment just out of the blue. She said, "Gosh, we've come so far," and I was like
we've been through a lot.
And I was like, "Yeah, I know, honey. I know it's really hard there to get along with in the beginning." And she was like talking about something totally different. She's like, "Well, no, I meant that. I wasn't meaning that. But now that you bring it up, yeah, you were a little bit of a pain in the beginning there." But yeah,
for us, I think it's totally lifestyle change. I mean, before we actually get to this point, we actually been through a lot. We used to go to the park, get water, and then carry it out to the house because, to begin with, I mean, when we first started, we don't even have running water. So, from someone that come from civilization and then suddenly change that you have to be like off grid and things like that. Even though I kind of like prepare myself because I was the one who always wanted to go off grid. I just want to just be one of the nation, things like that. But when you actually doing it, it's kind of like challenging to begin with. But then after a while, you adapt to it. So it's interesting. I mean, you just have to have a will that you want to have certain kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always roses. It's not always happy, but you can make it if you're willing to. Just work with what you got.
I want to bring in sort of a historical context here because it's so interesting to hear the two of you talk about it. A lot of people feel like I could never do that. I don't have the skills, or I don't have the patience, or I don't have the mindset. And it does feel like this idea of going back to smaller is a pretty significant historical moment. In some ways, it's sort of a repudiation of the larger commercial consumer mentality that feels like it traps a lot of people. One of the interesting things about running the Facebook page for this event has been we can see the demographics of those who come and like the page. And the largest demographic is middle-aged women.
Oh.
And I thought, that was a surprise to me, but in some ways it's not, right? Because the movement in some ways represents this sense of frustration. I just don't feel good. I don't feel happy. I'm not feeling like I'm in control. Does that resonate as well?
We feel very in control of our lives at this time in our lives. We feel, I feel, except, well, she's in control of my life. So, that's how that works. But when Finn first came to when I met Finn, she was living in London and I was living in Miami. And I had a 2,000 square foot house plus a 800 square foot apartment on the back. And it was just like a tomb, if you will. And so, like, the first time Finn came over, I don't know, during that first stay, she made the observation about how big the house was and how she didn't know where our relationship was going, or where we were going with our relationship, but she made it clear she wasn't going to clean that place. And so me being Mr. Smarty
I can't
Pants,
spend too much time cleaning,
Yeah.
so my life has got something else to do. You know, going outside, enjoy something else instead of just cleaning the house.
yeah, and me being Mr. Materialistic and living for money and the dollar and everything, I was like, oh, we'll hire somebody, you know, real flippant type loser attitude. And Finn was, oh no, we can't pay somebody to clean our house. I mean, so then I made a joke. I was, so what do you want to do? Live in a dirty house? And then she came right back and she said, well, maybe you consider selling this thing and getting something smaller. And at the time, it was a joke in my mind, but the seed had been planted, but it was a joke. The funny thing is that when I consider our lights now and where it was back then, you know, living in Miami, dealing with everything, and here just being in the woods, this is an easy life we have. When we first went tiny, we were on grid. You know, we built our cabin, 200 amp service, septic system, well water, etc. Then we moved our cabin to her property over here, you know, here at the lake, and that's when we decided to cut the umbilical cord, and we decided to go 100% off grid. And there was a moment there when we went, because we went like from being big cities, big house, big everything, living tiny. Okay, there was an adjustment there, but we were on grid. Then we picked up the house, literally picked up the cabin, put it on the back of a big giant truck, and moved it and had it plop down in the middle of the woods and didn't hook up to anything. And we decided, you know, we had the electric company come out, and there's no power poles out here. And they were telling us about all the trees and everything that had to be moved and what had to be done to get power out here. And because we're at the lake and we have a natural spring on the property, the county out here was telling us what would be involved with a septic system and pumps and all this stuff, like to move the water around in the septic system. And all of a sudden, I mean, it went from like a $6,000 septic system to like a $12,000 septic system. So all of a sudden, this composting toilet that Finn had been talking about that she wanted suddenly sounded like a great idea. So we cut the umbilical cord, and before we had water hooked up for the well, and before we knew what that spring water was all about, we're going to a local park and filling up 5-gallon jugs of water for a couple of months, a while.
Half a year, maybe.
An outdoor composting system, toilet system, a DIY system.
I used to just go in the wood and then do my business in the wood. So, I mean, everything else at this point is like, wow, this luxury, having a composting toilet is much better than going to wood, but I don't mind.
So it was a little weird. I mean, not weird. It was like, I mean,
it's more like adventure, don't you think?
It became primitive. And so to be where we're at now, I mean, you know, all solar, you know, backup generators, you know, water running into the cabin, composting toilet, you know, all of this and everything.
It's learning process, you know.
It was a long year to get to where we're at now, or you know, or to get to this, you know, going from nothing off grid to the system and setup we have now. It took about a good year to get it all set up.
And got far to go. I mean, you know, we want to put wind generation. We still learn and figure out what will be best for our setting and things like that. It's just like, you know, it's just learning progress. You know, it's nothing perfect to begin with. You just have to work with what you got. So,
I want to use a hard word. The word is addiction, right? Because I think what I hear from a lot of people is that's romanticizing roughing it. You know, if I actually did that, I would lose the motivation in my life. I would sit around and not do anything. That to some degree, I'm kind of addicted to the lifestyle. And if I don't have the busyness and the spending of money and the activities, what will I do? Will I lose my life purpose?
Or believe it or not, there's a lot to do living this lifestyle, believe it or not.
There's a lot to do. Now, I know for us, our situation is probably maybe unique compared to maybe another person, because with our tiny house festivals, there's a lot that goes into those. So we're busy with those. We have a lot going on with those, so we're actively involved with that. Here on the homestead, just go, down in Miami. Okay, I got up in the morning, I opened the back door, I let my dog go out in the backyard, I made coffee, I sat down in front of my computer with the news going on in the background on the TV. That was every morning, Monday through Friday of my life. Here, I wake up in the morning, I make my coffee, I go outside and let the chickens out, there's just a little trade-off. There's just something different. There's a different substitution. Yeah.
I mean,
there's the cutting the wood, for the winter.
To me, living in the city is more like less thing to do for me. It's like more like a pattern. You wake up in the morning, you do your workout, you go to work, you come back, you sleep. So it's nothing challenging. But when you change your lifestyle to off-grid or whatever that whoever want to live that lifestyle, they want to change. If you're not happy with something, change. You don't have to stick with what you're not happy with. You've got the power to change. And it's not going to be easy change, but, at least you'll be happier than stuck with something you don't like. So to me, living off-grid, like living like what we are right now, is give me a lot to do. Give me an option. If I don't want to work on this today, I can go and dig some hoe, work on the drainage. I can empty the weed bucket. It's a lot of things for me to do. I mean, it's not just like I'm a rat. What's it called? Is that rat in the city? No, what's it called? Like being stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have to just get up, go to work, come back, so dull.
And it brings us back to what we were talking about in the beginning. It's an always learning experience out here. It's not like, okay, John and Finn, they're all, we have people come out and they go, wow, you guys got a really neat set. They see our big rainwater collection system and the drums, and, they see the massive piles of cut wood, and, I'm saying massive. To me, it's massive. But anyway, she did it all, not me. Seriously. And the thing is that it's a never ceasing learning experience. And there's all these great people out there, people that we know we can go to. And I don't feel humbled, or I don't feel like embarrassed going to them. Like, okay, we've been doing this for 5 years. We've been living off grid now for a while. I don't feel embarrassed going to them and saying, how do I do this? Or I screwed this up, or I need to learn how to do this. Because I know there's these select group of people. There's about these 18 people out there that I know I can go to, and they're experts in their little individual categories, who can just offer an abundance of information, and they do it in a way that makes me feel, they actually make me feel like I'm doing them a favor because I'm going to them and asking them a question, and it makes me feel just so wonderful. And to me, it's at that moment I'm like, yeah, this is what the tiny house community is all about. We're sharing their help, and that information they're giving me is going to help me get through the winter, and help me get through the summer, and help me grow things, and help me. Charmaine Poteet, shout out to Charmaine. She teaches us everything about our chickens. We didn't know what brooding was. We had chickens for like a half year or so. We didn't know what brooding was. And we thought our chicken was dying because it wouldn't come out of its box. And so we built a whole little thing inside the house. We brought the chicken in the house. We set it down. We got all this stuff, blankets. We're like, oh my gosh, it's going to die, and I contacted Charmaine, and I sent her video and pictures, and she's like, it's brooding, John. Take it back outside and get those fake eggs out of the boxes. It thinks it's sitting on a real egg. something I read online, put a fake egg in there, make some lay eggs. So, I mean, and I didn't feel like adult because Charmaine's just so funny in the way she shared the information. It was just sort of like, oh, what's brooding? You got chickens and you don't know what brooding is, let me tell you. Whereas maybe the other delivery mechanism could have been, really, seriously, you got chickens and you don't even know what brooding is, you moron. No, she didn't come across that way at all. It was like we had the greatest laugh in the world that night. It was the funniest thing. So
if all of the ways that I measure my life, right, or let's say not me, but let's just say we're talking in sort of in a general way in Western culture. So it's my job, it's my career, it's my sense of busyness, it's my purchases, it's the house I live in. I could see where going small is both an attraction and creates fear, right? That I'm attracted to it, but can I really do that? And would I even be satisfied?
yeah, sure. I mean, the whole idea of, here's a great example. I'm living in Miami. Finn's living in London. The fact that I sold my business and I retired gave me the luxury of being able to have time to go and visit Finn and spend like a month, 2-3 months over there at a time in London to visit with her. Her job over there gave her the luxury of being able to come spend time over here. But she made the observation one day. She said, every time I call you, you're either up in Georgia, your property up there in the woods. You're either coming back from up there or you're planning a trip up there. Why don't you move up there? And the idea of doing that was inconceivable to me. I mean, I probably spent 12 months out of 12 months of the year, I probably spent before I met Finn and spent a lot of time, with her and going over to London or spending time with her over here in the States. Before that, I probably spent a good 7 months out of the year in Georgia in the woods, doing my thing. But the idea of moving from my comfort zone in Miami was inconceivable to me. And I was like, no, this is where my home is. End of story. No considering it, no discussion, just no, this is where my home is in Miami. And Finn was, no, you got a house in Miami, but that's no home. And so we planned to do this, and still I couldn't let go of my comfort of what I had in Miami. So I was like, after we talked about it for a long time, all right, I'll get an architect. We'll get a builder. We'll build like a 1,200 square foot cabin up there. And Finn was more like, no, I was thinking more about a little place. Here's a funny segue sidebar thing. We didn't even know what a tiny house was. We didn't even know there was a tiny house community. We didn't even know that there was tiny houses on wheels. Finn just had this whole thing in her head that you're happiest when you're out of the city. You're happiest when you're in the woods and when you're doing your thing. And she wanted to have a smaller place, like not a big place. And this is CP. Hi. And so the whole idea. So when I finally was like, okay, yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna move to Georgia. We're gonna go to the Georgia woods. I still couldn't let go of that whole monolithic lifestyle, and I was thinking how I'm gonna bring that up here to the Georgia woods. And again, another whole process to get out of it, to get away from that whole lifestyle.
Any change, of course, it'll be scary because you don't know what's lie ahead. But we can't tell you that if you change, things gonna be good or things gonna be bad. It's only but you will not know until you try it. And it's no right or wrong for you to decide that you want to change your lifestyle or you don't want to change your lifestyle. It's just whatever outcome, you just have to live with it. You can make it work, but don't think it's going to be suddenly going to be perfect. Of course it's going to be, it's going to be
there's
Problems.
going to be problems. There's
Yeah.
going to be challenges. But
Either way, I mean, if you stay where you're at right now, of course, you might have frustration with your life right now. You might not be satisfied with your life right now. It's no guarantee that when you change it, you'll be happier. It's just different. That's all. It might not be. It might not be happier. It might not be more suffering. It's just different kind of a situation.
fortunately for us, it was the happier part, you know.
But you can work with whatever you got. It's your decision. You just have to decide that you want to try. And you know, I mean, to me, it's not the end of the day if you make a decision and then things turn out bad. You just have to figure it out what you're gonna do next.
That's a unique philosophy mindset my wife has. She doesn't. She does not fear screwing up as much as I do. She's, I'm not going to say comfortable, but she is okay with making a decision that she feels is, let's do this. Not a haphazard. Well, you do make some haphazard decisions, yeah. But yeah. Let's talk about that whole coffee, non-flour, non-chocolate, non-sugar brownie.
What brownie?
Yeah, God, yeah, that was a.
Baby, it's no big deal. It's just a brownie. You don't like it, don't eat it.
Yeah, the deers and
Right.
coyotes and raccoons didn't eat it either.
It's not gonna kill you.
Another great story. She made these brownies out of coffee,
Black
beans, unhappiness, sadness. What was the other ingredients?
Maybe that's ill.
Yeah,
I don't
but
know. CP, get out.
Yeah. What was it? Oh, and tears from small children. I think that was the other. I think that was the other ingredient. And not only did we not eat it, not only did our dog not eat it, but I took it out in the woods, like way out in the woods, and dumped it, thinking the deers, raccoons, coyotes. We go back out there like days later, it's still sitting there, you know.
Well, it's good fertilizer at the end, you know.
Yeah, good building brick for a homesteader, you know. But
so in addition to this sort of willingness to try things and feel comfortable with the outcome, which from an outsider's perspective feels incredibly healthy, right? Because the opposite is this fear we have of doing anything wrong. You can make the argument that the culture provides or perpetuates because it gets us to buy things from other people because we're afraid of doing it ourselves. But aside from that willingness to make decisions and to try things out, you clearly were kind of the driving force in this move to simplification and getting smaller and an appropriate balance in life. How much of that comes from your coming from Thailand? Is that a part of the story, or is it just your personality?
I would say both. Yeah. I guess it's the way that my parents, you know, the way I grew up, the way my parents taught me how to do things, and also with every single experience in life, it's kind of like blended in together. I always know what I want. I always know that how I want to live my life. I might not get, you know, the right way to do it. I might get a different way to do it, but I know at the end what I want. So I think being of a different culture is actually influenced from how I think. I mean, I'm not completely like everything's about money. But yeah, of course, I mean, I do know that money is a kind of like essential to life. And but living simple is always be something that I always wanted to do. I think, I don't know about you. I mean, do you always want to somehow in the back of your mind you want to go back and live the way that you grew up, you know, pretty simple?
Well, my history is that I grew up very simple, and then when my parents passed away, I got adopted by an Amish family, and then I really lived simple, and so and then when I became older and graduated high school and went to college, I embraced money. That was like, yay. And so I spent my entire, from like age 15 till like age, when I June 2009, up until that point, my whole life was focused on how much more I could get, how much more I could put in the bank, how much more I could own. But I was always, as an adult, still running up to the woods, and you can kind of like take the boy out of the swamp, but it's hard to take the swamp out of the man type mentality. I would wear my suit and drive my cars and things of that nature, but at the same time, I would have this like superior attitude towards my colleagues because I knew none of them, um, you know, could. The only thing they could do with a rope is tie their shoelaces. You know, I mean, it was like, I was like a real egotistic little businessman back in the day. Um, but then in June 2009, when I was laying in a hospital bed, my health was just, I just worked myself to death. I made a decision that was it. I'm giving it all up, and that I was going to find out what being happy was about. And I realized, like, people talk about having that thunderstruck moment, that epiphany, that bright light moment. And I always thought that was kind of something for the movies, or, weird stuff, but that actually happened to me. June 6, 2009. I was laying in a hospital bed, morphine drips, IVs, machines and things. And I just went, I don't need this anymore. All the money in the world doesn't mean nothing. And so I decided to give it all up, and not give it all up like just, I'm going to become a monk, but I decided to sell my medical lab. I decided to get rid of my cars. I decided to start walking. That was a new concept to me. I lost 80 pounds. I lost 10 inches off my waist. I mean, I was a monolithic sloth. I was a mess. And it was the following year, shortly thereafter, that I met Finn. And so I was in the search of figuring out what I wanted in life. And so, as much as I was afraid and not comfortable with leaving Miami and leaving the house and all of that, I was still in search of, I think if I wasn't at that point in my life at that moment, I wouldn't have been as, I don't think I would have, well, I don't even think I would have met you, because she wouldn't have gone for a guy like me. She didn't mind the fact that I was so big and, out of shape and slothy and everything back then. But the type of person that I was prior to her meeting me, my mindset, she wouldn't have had anything to do with me. But because I was in search of something other than what I had, and then the whole idea of, yeah, you know what, going to the woods, that's where I like to be. Okay, but we're going to do it I thought on my terms, and then that changed. And then fortunately, between her and just being a good support mechanism, and then just having people that we were able to talk to and get good information. A lot of the local guys, the old guys 10 years my senior, the old vets, and the farmers and the good old boys that were up here, and they all love Finn. So they were more than happy to take us in and teach us things about growing stuff and farming and things of that nature. And again, that they were able to share it in a way where it didn't make me feel like I was an idiot, that I didn't know anything. And then when we started with the whole build and the construction, or the build out of our beloved cabin here, being, tapping into people who were able to help us and share information, it made the transition to do this doable. But if it's a matter of living in fear, when I look back at it, I'm glad I was able to push through all the things that I was going through, because I can honestly say at this time in my life, the way we live and our lifestyle and the things that we're involved in the tiny house community and the people that we encounter, and the person that I share my life with, and all of our cats, I can honestly say that this is the happiest I've ever been as I approach 60, as 60's coming up in the years ahead of me here. I can honestly say, that this is what happiness is. Maybe living off grid isn't what somebody's tiny house dream is. Maybe living in a foundation house such as ours isn't somebody's tiny house dream. Maybe living in a converted school bus is somebody's. Maybe living in an RV or a travel trailer, that's somebody's tiny house lifestyle dream. Mandy Lee, she lives in a little teardrop, one of those little, I wish I could remember the name of it. Her nickname for it is the Phoenix, but she lives full time, traveling the United States in a
camper.
And that little
right.
little teardrop. I can honestly say that's just a little too small for me. That's just a little too. That's like getting out for a week or two on the road type unit for me. But I can't judge that. She accomplishes great things. She reaches out and touches people. Her art and photography and her videos from the road and her philosophies and I've listened to her speak at tiny house events, and she who am I or anybody to say a teardrop isn't the way to live? I mean, we all have our different ways of living this lifestyle. And if we were all just encouraging to each other, about our lifestyles, I think more people, I know people in the lifestyle who just aren't happy. They're not happy. And it has nothing to do with their lifestyle. It just has to do with things that are going on in their lives. And I think, I think that if they had more people like who we've been blessed to meet, who's been encouraging to us and who've been nice to us and who have been willing to share information freely with us. I think that's one of the reasons why Finn and I are so compelled to give so much back to the tiny house community, because it's been so darn good to us, sans a few odd encounters and things of that nature. But on a whole, we've been very blessed, and the people we've met and the people we've encountered and the people who've educated us and the people who've shared with us. What somebody's dream is for living tiny, God bless them, whatever it is, God bless them. And hopefully they encounter people who will bless them too, with the way they interact with them and the way that they share knowledge and encouragement with them.
I mean, in a way, what are you afraid of? I mean, if you try this lifestyle, you don't like it, you can always go back. It's no certain thing like you have to stick with this lifestyle. You don't like it. If you don't like something, change.
Yeah.
Change. Life's too short to be unhappy.
Two perfect messages from the two of you to finish. Thank you both, John and Finn. This has really been delightful.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it, Steve. Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Take care.